Hey folks, a lot of people today are writing about how all men are created equal, or we hold these truths to be self-evident, or some of the greatest lines written in all of history. I got another one for you. Great as the evil is, a dismemberment of the Union would be worse. James Madison to Thomas Jefferson, 1787. Hey folks, I'm Tad Stoermer. I'm a visiting scholar at the University of Southern Denmark. I'm a historian of resistance and the author of the forthcoming A Resistance History of the United States. Madison wrote that to justify allowing the transatlantic slave trade to continue in the Constitution. But what it reveals, whether he intended to or not, was the founding logic of the American state. Oppression is acceptable, even necessary, so long as it preserves the white republic. Madison wasn't saying slavery was good. He was saying it was worth it. And that's what they all said. Worth the human cost, worth the violence, worth embedding into law, worth the suffering. Because what mattered most wasn't justice, what mattered most wasn't the universal application of Enlightenment ideals. It was keeping the Union intact. Why? To preserve a racial order and its white identity unchallenged for the personal benefit of those who had created it. And that logic didn't die with them. It didn't die with the founders who are going to be celebrated so much today. It was passed on, codified, normalized, and enforced for centuries. And this week it was reaffirmed in full view when Congress handed billions of dollars to ICE, expanded it into the most powerful, least accountable law enforcement force in federal history. But ICE isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system, created with bipartisan support, by the way, and updated for a new era. And if you want to understand how it works and why it matters, you need to understand what authoritarian regimes always do when they need to enforce ideology. They build paramilitaries. The Nazi regime built theirs in layers. The SA, the brown shirts, used public intimidation, beatings, and street violence to destabilize democratic institutions. The SS took over internal security and racial enforcement. The Gestapo, which began as a Prussian state police agency, was absorbed into the SS and transformed into a secret police force tasked with eliminating dissent and hunting down ideological enemies. It operated outside the courts. It answered only to the regime. That's how authoritarian systems function. They don't rely on law enforcement. They create enforcement arms that are loyal to ideology, not law. And that's what ICE has become. So again, formed in 2002 as part of Homeland Security, ICE began as a coordination agency. But over the last 2 decades, it's been restructured, funded, and politicized into a paramilitary force, conducting raids, detentions, removals, often, almost always now, without judicial oversight. It operates detention centers where due process doesn't exist. It detains children. Who cares? They're not white children. It surveils communities. And as of yesterday, it's doing all of that with the full backing of the United States Congress. You don't need to stretch to compare this to fascism. The Nazis themselves looked to us. They admired how America had already built a functioning white ethnostate. Slavery by law, genocide by policy, segregation by statute, immigration bans by race, policing and punishment by design. They studied the U.S. convict leasing system to create their forced labor camps. They praised Jim Crow for how it weaponized everyday law to enforce permanent exclusion. They noted how lynchings could happen with impunity because state law looked away. State law enabled it. And they saw how American patriotism managed to dress all of it up in the language of liberty. How American national identity, with its constant negotiations with principle, could in fact enable it. And that was the brilliance of American racial identity. It didn't just tolerate exclusion, it justified it. It made it feel virtuous, necessary, even natural. Great as the evil is, a dismemberment of the Union would be worse. That's the American creed. It's worth it. And that's the part we still haven't faced. Because today there are millions of Americans who would agree with Madison. Yeah, the evil's great, but keeping the country together is more important. more important than immigrant lives, more important than due process, more important than equality. And if you still believe that, then you've proved the point. You don't have to support ICE raids or detention centers or to uphold the system. You just have to agree with Madison that some people's rights can be sacrificed for the greater good. For America, that's not liberty. That's authoritarian logic. That's how liberal nationalists can play the same game as the nationalists on the right. You're working for the same goal, which is why no real opposition can be created, because everybody is still working from the same playbook. America über alles. And it's always the same, whether it's 1787, 1933, or 2025. So this Independence Day, forget the fireworks. Ask yourself what kind of union we're actually preserving. Because when Congress funds a paramilitary to enforce white nationalist ideology and calls it democracy, they're not betraying the founders, they're fulfilling their promise.